Hi, my name's Brooklyn. My dad broke my jaw for daring to say one sentence, one truth, about his wife. They told the world I was unstable, ungrateful, difficult. But behind closed doors, they were stealing from my mother's foundation, rewriting her legacy, and cutting my name off everything she left me. They hosted dinners in my childhood home without setting a place for me. They called it family unity. And I stayed quiet. Until the punch. Now I wonder, how many lies can a family serve before the truth walks in, uninvited? Would you have stayed silent too? And that's when I knew. My silence had expired. It had been a few minutes since I walked away from the dining room table, but my chest still felt tight, like I had swallowed something sharp and it got stuck behind my ribs. The house was unusually quiet for a Sunday. Even the cicadas outside seemed to sense something had cracked. The kitchen lights were still on behind me, casting soft yellow hues across the hardwood floors that once held my mother's footprints. That home, no, her home, wasn't just walls and windows. It held secrets now. Documents signed in shadows. Conversations rehearsed in front of mirrors. I stood outside my bedroom door for a few seconds longer than usual. I could hear my father's voice, muffled and low, as if he knew the walls might listen. Probably telling Seraphine I had overreacted, that I was being too emotional. That classic line they always reached for when they had nothing else to say. Inside my room, I didn't turn the lights on right away. My phone buzzed again. Another email, same sender. This one had no greeting, just a line. The deed transfer was finalized last Tuesday, as discussed. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Earlier that evening, Seraphine had asked if I could help with dinner. Said it'd be just family, casual, nothing formal. But when I stepped into the dining room, Merrick was already seated, suit jacket on, a fountain pen placed neatly beside a folder. Lathan leaned against the far wall, arms crossed like he was watching a show. The energy in the room was all wrong. Seraphine smiled as she motioned for me to sit. "It's just some paperwork," she'd said, "to tidy up the loose ends on the property. Nothing serious." She slid the folder across the table. I opened it. My name, the full legal one my mother had carefully chosen, was lined through in bold black ink. Beside it was Seraphine's name, typed neatly under new legal owner. The house on Oglethorpe Street, the one my mom planted roses in front of, where I scraped my knees on the porch steps, was no longer mine. They didn't need my signature. The transfer had already happened. This dinner? This was theater. Merrick hadn't said a word at first, just cleared his throat and nodded like it was his way of showing agreement. When I looked at him, really looked, I saw no conflict, no hesitation, just indifference, like he'd chosen his side a long time ago and never bothered to tell me. Lathan chuckled under his breath, reaching for his sweet tea. "Brooklyn's always been sentimental," he muttered, not even bothering to hide the smugness in his tone. I looked down at the folder again, then back at Seraphine. Her hands were folded neatly, wedding ring glinting under the chandelier. She looked almost proud, the way someone looks when they've pulled off a trick and no one claps because no one knows it happened yet. I didn't say anything. I didn't scream or ask why or beg them to explain. I just stood up, slowly, calmly, and left the table. My fingers grazed the back of the chair as I passed, grounding myself for just a second. No one followed me. No one called out. I walked past the hallway where the family photo now hung. It was a new print, one Seraphine had taken last Christmas. It had all the smiles lined up neatly. Her, Merrick, Lathan, even his dog. I wasn't in it. Back in my room, I finally turned the lamp on. The soft glow made the space feel smaller than usual. My shelves still held the awards I'd won in high school, the pressed flower my mom had saved in a frame, a life half erased, remnants of a daughter they'd replaced without saying it out loud. I sat on the edge of my bed, heart racing like I'd run 10 blocks. I checked the timestamp on the email. It was sent 5 days ago, which meant they had already signed the documents, met with the lawyer, sealed everything, before the dinner invite. That was the part that stung the most. Not just the betrayal, but the fact that they'd decided I didn't deserve to know until after it was done. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a photo. It was faded, curled at the edges, My mom and I on the front porch, painting the railings. She had a smear of white across her cheek. I remember laughing when I pointed it out. She'd told me, "This house is your roots, baby. One day it'll be yours." But now it belonged to someone else. Seraphine hadn't earned that home. She hadn't mopped those floors after my mother's chemo. She hadn't changed the locks when a stranger showed up one night asking for money. She hadn't patched the leak in the laundry room ceiling with duct tape and prayer. But she got the deed. I placed the photo back in the drawer and shut it gently. No slamming, no drama, just quiet. Outside, I could hear Lathan laughing from the living room, probably at some video. My jaw clenched, not out of anger, but something heavier, like grief dressed in new clothes. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house creak. Every pop in the wood felt like it was whispering, "You don't belong here anymore." But here's the thing, I wasn't planning to leave, not yet. They thought they could cut me out like trimming fat off a steak. Quiet, clean, final. They were wrong. Because that dinner didn't mark the end of anything. It was the beginning. So I waited, not to forgive, but to prepare. I didn't expect preparation to look like this. Standing in the back of the attic on a humid Thursday afternoon, surrounded by dust, loose insulation, and the faint smell of mildew. The attic always felt too still, like the air hadn't moved in years. The fan up here hadn't worked since I was a teenager, and nobody had bothered to fix it. Why would they? This space was mine and my mother's, by blood, by history, and now by memory alone. The light bulb hanging from the ceiling buzzed faintly as I pulled the chain and revealed what had gone untouched for over a decade. A row of boxes marked Eliora. Her name, my mother's name, written in her own hand, the cursive elegant but beginning to fade. I pulled out the first box and sat cross-legged on the floor, brushing away a thin film of dust. Inside, there were old church programs, community newsletters, handwritten thank you cards from the women she had helped. All the pieces of her legacy, sealed away like she never existed. I swallowed back the familiar lump forming in my throat and kept digging until I found it. A fabric-wrapped photo album. Embroidered in the corner were 3 simple initials. EML. Eliora May Loring. My mother. I flipped it open gently. The first page showed her holding me as a newborn. The second, me on the porch, age 12, gripping a paintbrush too tightly, grinning at something just out of frame. That day came flooding back in fragments. The Georgia sun scorching the railings, the lemon water sweating through the glass, and my mother handing me a small box with a velvet ribbon wrapped around it. She'd said, "You don't inherit love, Brooklyn. You protect it." Inside had been a vintage necklace, gold-plated, with a tiny sapphire pendant and a scratch on the clasp from where she'd dropped it once on the church steps. It had been hers since college. Before Merrick, before me. She wanted me to have it because she believed family heirlooms weren't about blood, but about meaning. That was the last time I saw the necklace. Until 2 days ago. I came downstairs to find Seraphine waiting in the living room. She had one of those carefully arranged smiles, the kind that makes you feel like you've been invited to a party you didn't RSVP to. She patted the cushion beside her like we were old friends. "I found something of your mom's while cleaning," she said, voice syrupy. And I thought, maybe it's time you had it. From her handbag, she pulled out a small velvet box. My stomach turned. She opened it slowly, as if revealing something sacred. And there it was, the necklace. That necklace. The scratch was still there, right on the clasp. "I had it cleaned and reset for you," she said, as if that justified anything. "You should wear it to dinner Friday. It'll look lovely on you." I stared at her. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, just watched me with that same practiced expression, a blend of elegance and manipulation. I couldn't bring myself to speak. If I did, I wasn't sure what would come out. So I took the box, nodded like a robot, and walked back upstairs. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid awake wondering where she found it, how long she'd had it, why she chose now to give it back, as if it were hers to return. The house creaked as usual, but my thoughts were louder. The next morning, I found myself standing outside Merrick's office door. He was inside on a call. I knew that tone, formal, rehearsed, the way he always spoke when there was money or paperwork involved. I leaned against the wall, unsure what I was even waiting for. Then I remembered my phone. I'd been recording notes earlier and forgot to stop the app. Out of instinct, I slid it into my pocket, mic up, and walked away. Later that day, I played the file back. Most of it was quiet. But then, Merrick's voice, clear, low, and deliberate. "She doesn't need the house, Ben. She's not like her mother. Seraphine's boys, they deserve it more than she does. Brooklyn. She's always been distant, detached." I paused the recording. I didn't need to hear more. There was something about hearing your own father talk about you like you're a line item on a spreadsheet, like you're a name they're erasing from a will. He didn't sound angry or hurt, just finished, like he'd already closed the book on me. I set the phone down and stared at the wall for a long time. I wasn't crying, not anymore. That kind of pain doesn't leak out in tears. It just settles, like sediment in your chest, weighing everything down. I opened my dresser drawer and took out the velvet box. I opened it again, just to be sure it wasn't some cruel hallucination. It wasn't. I ran my thumb across the tiny scratch. Still there. I didn't put it on. I placed it back in the drawer, tucked it under an old t-shirt, and shut it firmly. I didn't need to wear it to feel its weight. Hours passed like fog. I skipped dinner. Lathan knocked once and then left, probably to tell Seraphine I was being dramatic. I didn't care. I wrote in my notebook instead. Every thought, every name, every date. By midnight, I sat in the dark with only the glow of my phone screen lighting my face. I opened the voice memo again, hit play, and listened. This time all the way through. At the end, Merrick laughed, just once, a short, bitter laugh. "She'll understand," he said. "Or not. Either way, it's done." And that was it. No regret, no hesitation, just certainty. I turned off the screen and sat still for a while. Then I whispered aloud to no one but myself. "If I say nothing now, I won't exist by Christmas." I turned off the lamp. The night didn't feel like an ending anymore. It felt like a pivot. They'd stolen more than a necklace, more than a house. They were stealing history, mine, hers, ours, and I was done letting them. Day 2 didn't take long to remind me why I started counting. It was late, well past sunset, and the house was unusually still. That kind of quiet only ever happened right before something exploded. I had just come back from the garage, where I'd been sorting through old donations my mom once organized for the church. The silence followed me back into the hallway like smoke before a fire. Then it started. "The emergency cash is gone!" Seraphine's voice pierced the house like someone had set off an alarm. High-pitched, sharp, performed. "The safe was open!" Within seconds, footsteps thundered across the floorboards. Doors slammed. Drawers opened and closed in a frenzy of manufactured panic. I stepped out of my room just in time to see Merrick heading straight for me. His expression wasn't confused. It was settled. Set in the way a verdict is delivered after a trial with no jury. "Where is it?" he demanded. I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. "I don't know," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "You were the only other one who knew the combination," Seraphine added as she stepped into view, a hand over her chest like she'd just witnessed something tragic. I didn't want to believe it, Brooklyn. I really didn't. That sentence landed heavier than I expected, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed what I'd already started to accept. They didn't need evidence. They needed someone to blame. Lathan showed up last, trailing behind with his arms crossed and that damn grin he wore like it was stitched into his face. "You're kidding, right?" I said, turning toward Seraphine. "You think I took the money?" Merrick didn't blink. "We had $3,000 in that safe. I put it there last week. It's gone now." "You think I'd risk everything for that?" I asked. "Really? You've been unstable lately," Seraphine said gently, like she was choosing her words out of pity. "This past week has been difficult, unstable. That word, It's always how they start to dismantle you. First, they erase your name from paperwork, then your memories from conversations. Finally, they label you. And once you're labeled, everything you do is either dramatic or dangerous. Call the police then, I said, calling their bluff. Merrick stepped closer. No one's calling anyone. If you give it back, this ends now. But if I find out later that you're lying, you're out, you hear me? I didn't take anything, I said, voice steady. And you won't find anything. Seraphine wiped the corner of her eye. No tear, just performance. I trusted you. I never asked you to, I snapped. Lathan laughed under his breath. Guess we all know what she's really like now. That did it. I turned away. I didn't bother trying to defend myself anymore. Because in that moment, I understood something deeper than their accusations. This wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about isolation, undermining, control, and they were finally showing their hand. I stepped outside into the backyard. The air was thick, sticky with humidity, and something worse, betrayal that didn't even pretend to be subtle anymore. I walked past the garden my mother once nurtured, now overrun with weeds and neglect. The soil used to be rich with effort. Now it was just dirt, much like this house, once built on love, now layered with lies. Near the tool shed, I paused. The moon was high and the bugs chirped in rhythms I'd grown up with. But even that sound couldn't drown out what just happened. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I thought, because if they were willing to paint me as a thief without proof, then they'd do worse once I actually pushed back. I needed to stop assuming I could argue my way out. They didn't want my voice. They wanted my absence. So I walked back inside, quiet, unnoticed, and grabbed my phone. I locked myself in my room, sat down at my desk, and searched online for motion-triggered security cameras, discreet ones, battery-operated, easy to hide. I ordered one for overnight delivery, then downloaded a surveillance app and linked it to a new cloud account. I renamed the folder, in case they ever ask. My hands were steady the entire time. I opened my notebook and flipped past the few pages I'd already filled. My handwriting looked different now, sharper, less hesitant. On a blank page, I wrote, Day 2. The setup begins. Below that, I added bullet points. Safe location. Access code knowledge. Timeline of events. Possible motive, their version. Actual motive. Mine, isolation. I kept writing until the words started to blur. Then I closed the book, placed it inside a shoebox, and tucked it under the bed. Before turning off the light, I locked the door. It wasn't about paranoia anymore. It was strategy. They had crossed a line, and I had no intention of going back. The house went still again. But it wasn't the same kind of silence as before. This one felt like the calm just before something sharp and final. I slipped under the blanket and lay there, eyes open in the dark. They thought they could gaslight me into disappearing, but they underestimated what a cornered daughter could do. And like clockwork, they couldn't help but push again. It started with the table settings. Sunday morning came heavy and gray, a thick southern humidity pressing against the windows like it had something to say. I'd barely slept the night before, kept awake by the glow of my phone and the words I'd written in my notebook. Day 5. Let them think I lost. A plan doesn't always need to be loud, it just needs to be steady. At 9 a.m., Seraphine tapped on my door like we were roommates in a college dorm. Polite, controlled, performative. We're expecting company for brunch, she said. Please wear something neutral and help set the table. Family unity is important today. Neutral. That was her code for don't stand out. I didn't answer. I just closed the door and changed into a navy dress that I knew she hated, because it looked too much like something my mother wore in old church photos. Downstairs, the smell of cinnamon rolls and bacon tried to soften the atmosphere, but the chill in the room cut through it. Seraphine floated from room to room, adjusting place cards and napkin folds like she was hosting a garden party for the governor's wife. Merrick was already in a button-down, sleeves rolled, acting like he was the backbone of the operation when all he did was carry plates. There were 10 seats around the dining table, each labeled with a name card. I scanned the table. There wasn't one for me. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. The message was clear. Help serve, but don't stay. I finished laying out the water glasses, then turned toward the kitchen to get more coffee when Lathan slid in behind me, low enough that only I could hear. "You know," he said, "you actually fit the background pretty well. Keep your head down today. It might just be your best move." I turned slowly, looked him dead in the eye, and said nothing. He smirked like he'd won something. As guests began to arrive, cousins from Merrick's side, two ladies from the church committee, a family friend who always drank too much rosé, Seraphine turned into her version of America's sweetheart. She kissed cheeks, complimented outfits, and even gave someone a tour of the updated sunroom, as if she hadn't just gutted every trace of my mother from it 6 months ago. I stayed behind the scenes, helping pass plates, pretending not to hear when someone asked, "And who's that girl again?" They didn't answer. Or maybe they did, and I wasn't meant to hear. Halfway through the meal, with everyone seated and the room filled with chatter, Seraphine gently tapped a spoon against her mimosa glass. The room quieted. "I just wanted to take a moment," she said, smiling like it was a performance review, "to say how grateful we are for family. Even when things are difficult, we always find our way back to each other, don't we?" People murmured in agreement. A few heads nodded. Then she looked directly at me. "Yesterday," she continued, "Brooklyn said something that really hurt me. She called me a liar. In front of Merrick. In this house. I wouldn't normally share such things, but in the spirit of honesty..." I felt it before it happened, the pull of everyone's attention, the weight of their eyes. "I'm not asking for much," she added. "Just an apology. Not for me, but for the sake of this family." I stood still, hands clenched behind the back of the chair I was pretending to arrange. Merrick chimed in next, voice low but firm. "Brooklyn, we talked about this. Make it right." Talked about it? There'd been no conversation, just a setup, dressed in Sunday best. I looked around the room. No one looked shocked. No one stood up. They waited. Seraphine dabbed her napkin like she'd just survived something painful. I felt my face grow warm, not from shame, but from the rage that burned just beneath the surface of my composure. But I took a breath, stepped forward, and bowed my head. "I'm sorry," I said carefully. "For calling you a liar," I added. "It wasn't kind. I should have known better." A few people nodded approvingly. One even clapped softly, like it was a wedding toast. But only I knew what those words really meant. They were a currency. And I was buying time. I left the room without waiting for permission, walked up the stairs, shut my bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were steady again. I opened the drawer, took out the necklace Seraphine had gifted me, and laid it flat on the desk. I took a photo, close enough to capture the scratch on the clasp, and emailed it to myself. I titled it Chain of Custody and added a short note in the message, "Original item, taken, returned as gift." Next, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Day 5, let them think I lost." Outside the window, I could hear someone laughing downstairs. Probably Lathan. Probably at me. But none of that mattered. That evening, I joined them at dinner. Calm, quiet, obedient. Seraphine passed me the salad like we were friends again. Midway through the meal, I looked up at her and said casually, "If you keep rewriting the truth, I'll start recording it." Her hand paused slightly over the serving bowl. Just a flicker in her eye, one that told me she heard me loud and clear, even if she smiled a second later and said, "Oh, sweetheart, you've always had such an imagination." Let her think that. Let her believe I was still the same girl who took their orders and swallowed their lies. Because the moment she blinked, I knew she was rattled. And I hadn't even started yet. Pain doesn't erase clarity. It sharpens it. The next evening, the house had that familiar pressure again, like the air knew what was coming before I did. It was almost midnight. The lights in the hallway were off, but the kitchen light was still glowing, soft and warm. Too calm for this family. I had just finished rereading the note I scribbled in my notebook an hour earlier. Let them believe they're in control. I padded down the stairs barefoot, my socks quiet against the wood. The kitchen door was cracked, and I could hear Seraphine's voice drifting out, low and deliberate. Of course I mentioned her. If we don't start documenting her instability now, it'll be harder to explain the estate changes. She paused, listening, then added in a whisper, Brooklyn has always had episodes. We just never wanted to embarrass her. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My name, my life, being dissected like a diagnosis on the other end of a phone call. Of course Merrick's on board. He's the one who pushed the attorney, she continued. We're cleaning this up before it gets messy, before she makes it public. My hand tightened around the doorframe, the wood biting into my palm. I could have waited for her to hang up. I could have slinked back upstairs and added it to my growing archive of evidence. But something in me decided enough was enough. I pushed the door open slowly. She turned around, startled, then composed herself instantly, like she had a button behind her ear that activated charm. Brooklyn, she said with faux surprise. Couldn't sleep? I walked in, arms crossed. You've stolen everything that mattered to her, and now you're trying to erase me too. Her lips curled up slightly, amused. Oh, sweetheart, I don't need to erase what no one sees. Behind me, I heard the floor creak. Merrick stepped in from the hall, coffee cup in hand, as if this was just another night and we were talking about weather. What's going on? He asked, eyes scanning between us. I heard her, I said calmly. She's already telling people I'm unstable. You're helping her push it. Seraphine raised both hands slowly, like she was the reasonable one in a conversation with a drunk. Brooklyn, you misunderstood? Cut it, I snapped. You've been gutting this house room by room since the day she died. You're not just replacing her, you're rewriting everything she was. And now you want me out of the way too. Merrick sighed, rubbed his temple. We've tried being patient. This attitude, the disrespect, it ends now. She's delusional, Seraphine murmured. Dangerously so. My pulse spiked. Say one more word about my sanity, and I'll show everyone that little speech you gave on the phone. That got his attention. Merrick stepped forward. Apologize, he said, voice low. Right now. No. Then get out of this house. I held his stare. Make me. Seraphine looked at him. She's uncontrollable. And that was the moment. It didn't come with warning. There was no lead-up, no shout, no rage. Just a flash of movement and then impact. Merrick's fist connected with my jaw like he was swatting a fly. The sound echoed through the tile and into the silence that followed. I didn't feel it at first, just the jolt, then heat, then the copper taste blooming in my mouth as I dropped to the floor. The pain didn't register the way you'd expect. It didn't scream, it pulsed, a slow, steady beat that matched the blood rushing between my ears. I couldn't move, not for a second. Not while my body recalibrated to the reality that my own father had hit me hard enough to knock me off my feet. My cheekbone throbbed, my tongue touched something wet and metallic. I tried to swallow, but my throat was tight, shocked. Above me, silence. Then, a chuckle. Mine. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was finished. I pushed myself up on one elbow, wiped my mouth with the back of my sleeve, and looked up at them. Merrick's face was pale, like he hadn't expected the hit to land the way it did. Now then, I whispered, half choking on the words, half smiling through the blood. Lathan stood in the hallway, phone in hand. He didn't say anything, didn't record, didn't flinch, just watched. No one offered to help me up. I crawled toward the bathroom, dragging myself up by the sink once I got there. I shut the door, locked it. The mirror told the truth. Lip split, cheek swelling, a bruise already blooming across the side of my face like a sunset someone forgot to finish. I ran the water, let it pour over a rag until it was cold enough to make my fingers numb. I pressed it to my jaw, stared into my own reflection. They thought they silenced me, I murmured. But they just gave me the final proof I needed. Behind me, I could still hear murmuring. Maybe they were arguing. Maybe they were rationalizing. Didn't matter. I wasn't going to scream or post pictures online or run to the police just yet. I had something better than panic. I had time. And I had a plan. They ignored my presence. I erased their immunity. It had been exactly 2 weeks since the night my father broke something in my face and something deeper in himself. The bruises faded faster than expected, at least the ones on the outside. I'd gotten good with concealer, cold compresses, and silence. The swelling taught me not just how to move carefully, but how to watch more sharply. I didn't stop moving after that night. I started sleeping with my notebook under my pillow and checking my newly installed camera feed every morning before brushing my teeth. If they were going to destroy my place in this house, I was going to document every nail they pulled from the wall. And then, on a Monday afternoon, while scrolling through a former classmate's Instagram story, I saw it. A flyer for a community charity gala at the Savannah Arts Center. Celebrating Family Legacy and Community Impact, hosted by Seraphine and Merrick Loring. My last name. Their event. Their lie. But what made my breath stop was the logo in the bottom corner. I made that logo a year ago. For a mock branding project I'd shown Seraphine on a whim. She told me it was cute, then changed the subject. Now it was printed on flyers, banners, and even tote bags for the event. And I wasn't invited. I clicked through more photos. There was a whole campaign built around this night. Press, donors, handshakes, gold script invitations addressed to families across the county. But none to me. The event was scheduled for that Saturday, 4 days away. They didn't just leave me out. They made sure I wouldn't know. By Saturday evening, I was ready. I didn't need a ticket. I didn't need approval. I wore a simple black dress, nothing too loud, but unmistakably elegant. I pulled my hair back, pinned it tight, and carried a soft leather bag that held only 2 things, my phone and my notebook. I walked into the event like I belonged there because once upon a time, I would have been the one designing the welcome table. The lobby was bright, draped in string lights and velvet signage. There were tables lined with white cloth, champagne flutes clinking, soft jazz in the background. Everyone wore the kind of smile you practice in front of mirrors. People looked at me, confused, hesitant, but no one stopped me, until Lathan. He spotted me near the drinks table, raised his eyebrows, and sauntered over with a glass in hand. "Well, look who wandered in," he said, voice just loud enough for a few heads nearby to turn. "No one even noticed you weren't on the list," he added with a grin. "But sure, enjoy the free snacks." I smiled back, calm. "Thanks. I helped design the logo. I figured that bought me a drink." He blinked, surprised for half a second. Then his grin widened. "I mean, where else would you go?" he said, tone syrupy and cruel. "Nobody's renting to you, right?" Someone standing behind him stifled a laugh. I didn't move, didn't respond, let the comment hang, let them choke on it later. An older woman nearby leaned toward me and asked, "Are you helping with the event?" I turned to her, still smiling. "Something like that." I moved through the crowd without lingering, took mental notes of who was seated where, who looked too comfortable next to Seraphine, which donors clapped too hard when Merrick made his rounds. Then I spotted the stage, a backdrop of the logo I designed hung behind the podium. Seraphine stood beside it, her posture perfect, hands folded like a queen addressing her court. She began her speech. "Tonight, we celebrate not just families, but the foundation of what families represent: legacy, responsibility, and sacrifice." I stood in the back, sipping water, my phone in hand. I didn't record. Not yet. I didn't need her words. I needed their reactions. "And when we speak of legacy," she continued, "we think not just of what we inherit, but of what we choose to carry forward." That was when I felt it again, that burn in my chest. Not anger, not grief, precision. I opened my notebook. Page 42, list of donors. Page 43, copies of emails. Page 44, image of the necklace. Page 45, safe code notes. Page 46, timestamp of Merrick's recorded comment. This wasn't a diary, it was evidence, and she was giving me everything I needed, live. The speech ended with light applause. Seraphine smiled, stepped down from the stage, and began mingling. As she passed me, I stepped close enough that she could hear me, but no one else. "I hope you practiced what you preached," I said softly. She paused, her lips stiffening. Because it's your last chance. Her smile faltered, just for a second, but I saw it. She kept walking, and I left. I didn't need to stay for dessert. I already had everything I came for. Sometimes the only way to heal is to wound with the truth. The night after the gala, I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor with every light off except for the soft glow of my laptop. The house was quiet again, but this kind of quiet felt like something holding its breath. Outside, cicadas hummed and the street lamp filtered through the blinds, striping my arms in golden bars. It had been nearly 2 months since the night Merrick hit me, and the only bruise still visible was the one I left untouched, on purpose, beneath the surface. Everything I'd collected until now was scattered around me: receipts, photos, time-stamped notes, login records. The proof wasn't just sitting in memory anymore. It was physical, organized, ready. First, the footage. I opened the app connected to the small camera I'd hidden weeks ago behind the bookshelf near the family safe. A backup battery had kept it running longer than I'd hoped. I scrolled through hours of silent video. Nothing, more nothing. And then, there she was, Seraphine. It was mid-morning, about 3 days before they claimed the emergency cash went missing. She was in workout clothes, hair tied up, holding a phone to her ear as she walked up to the safe, calm, unbothered. She opened it like she'd done it 1,000 times, reached inside, counted bills, pulled them out. But it wasn't just the money she left with. She pulled a small cloth from her back pocket, one I instantly recognized. It was from my drawer, a monogrammed handkerchief my mother had embroidered with my initials when I was 13. She unfolded it delicately and tucked it just inside the edge of the safe door, enough to be visible but not suspicious. She closed the door, smiled, walked out. I sat back in my chair, breath steady, pulse even. She didn't just steal, she staged the whole thing. I clipped the footage, labeled it Safe Footage, Seraphine Setup, and uploaded it to my private cloud folder. Next up, the digital trail. Months ago, I'd offered to help Lathan with a startup pitch deck he was working on. He gave me his old laptop to adjust a file, same one he used for everything. He didn't know I'd installed a tracking software that mirrored his cloud activity to my offline folder. I opened it now and scanned through his recent downloads, messages, and forwarded files. Half of it was junk, bad jokes, empty pitches, LinkedIn requests. But the other half? Gold. There were screenshots of financial documents tied to the Eliora Foundation, my mother's legacy. The fund had been dormant for years after her passing. Seraphine claimed it was too difficult to manage, but that wasn't true. Turns out, the foundation had still been receiving small community grants, and those funds were quietly rerouted to a private account under Lathan's name. A crypto wallet, anonymized and shielded by LLC paperwork Merrick had signed off on. I found Merrick's e-signature on at least 3 internal memos. One of them read, "Approved temporary reallocation, LL, lowering project expenses, Q1, Q2. My mother's name. Their theft, and I had it all. I began compiling the files, dragging them into folders labeled neatly: legal, press, and public. Under legal, I stored every tax document, redirect notice, and bank transfer that linked Merrick to the laundering. Under press, I dropped photos from the gala, with time-stamped overlays showing their speeches against the backdrop of my stolen logo. Under public, I added the clip of Seraphine planting the handkerchief and a scanned copy of the foundation charter with Eliora's name front and center. Once it was done, I ran through the list twice more, cross-checked it with my notes. Color-coded what needed to be printed and what would go digital. There was no part of me shaking, no part of me hesitating, not anymore. When the clock hit 2:13 a.m., I clicked over to my YouTube dashboard. I uploaded a new video, unlisted for now. Title: Family Legacy, Redefined. The thumbnail was simple: a black background with the words in white. What you see isn't always what's real. The video itself opened with soft piano music and then the footage of Seraphine at the safe. No narration, no commentary, just dates, faces, facts. It was 13 minutes long. By the time the upload finished, I'd already set it to go live in 48 hours. Plenty of time for the storm to build. Plenty of time for them to wonder what I knew and how much I was willing to burn. I picked up my phone, opened the anonymous number I'd saved under a fake name, just in case someone ever searched my contacts. One word. Ready. I hit send. Then I leaned back in my chair, stared at the ceiling, and let the weight of what I was about to do settle into my bones. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance, restoration, making sure they could never gaslight me out of existence again. They tried to bury me. They forgot I was a seed. Truth burns slowly, but it leaves nothing unscathed. By noon, the day of the fundraiser, I had already loaded my car. The folders were stacked neatly in the back seat, envelopes sealed and numbered. The thumb drive was zipped into a small case in the side pocket of my bag, alongside a printed schedule of the evening's program. Seraphine loved schedules, loved knowing exactly who would speak and when. So did I. I arrived at the gala hall an hour before the doors opened. The venue was the same one they'd used weeks ago for the community event, only this time it had been rebranded. Loring Legacy Foundation, a night of renewal. A night of rehearsed lies. Inside, the chairs were already arranged, 30 of them facing the stage. The centerpieces were gold-trimmed, surrounded by eucalyptus sprigs and fake candles. A string quartet played softly as staff moved between rows, adjusting linens. I walked in with confidence, no badge, no introduction, just a clipboard and a calm expression. "Vendor?" one of the organizers asked. "Press packet delivery," I said smoothly. "Board materials for the trustees." She nodded, distracted, and waved me in. It took less than 15 minutes to place an envelope on every single chair. Inside each was a different piece of truth: scanned copies of financial transfers, still frames from the security footage, and, in a few selected ones, personal notes from former foundation beneficiaries who never received their promised support. I didn't put my name on anything. That wasn't the point. As the guests began arriving, I melted into the background. I stood by the far corner of the hall, dressed in navy, quiet and invisible, just how they preferred me. Except tonight, the silence was mine to break. Twist S16 had begun. When Merrick stepped up to the microphone to open the ceremony, he looked exactly like a man who believed everything was going his way. Crisp suit, pressed words. He opened with a story about Eleora, about how the foundation had been rebuilt in her honor. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. The applause that followed his speech was brief and polite. Then came Seraphine. In a soft champagne-colored dress, she floated up the steps with the grace of someone who'd been rehearsing in front of a mirror for months. "I am so proud," she began, "to carry on a legacy of integrity, compassion, and trust. When families come together to serve the community, we become more than individuals. We become stewards of something bigger." That was my cue. As she continued, I walked toward the AV table on the left side of the stage. One of the tech guys turned to stop me, but I leaned down and whispered, "USB swap, timing cue, updated," from Seraphine. He hesitated, then nodded. I pulled out the drive, inserted mine, and stepped back. The projector flickered once, then again, and then it started. First, the footage. Seraphine opening the safe, removing the cash, placing the cloth. No narration, just a timestamp. Then came the emails, screenshots between Lathan and two financial partners, casually discussing fund redirection before the old records get cleaned out. Lathan had even written, "Once she's out, we'll restructure it all under Seraphine's name." Next was Merrick. His voice, recorded, filled the room. "She doesn't need it. She's not her mother. Brooklyn was always more of a burden than a beneficiary." A hush spread like oil across the chairs. Someone gasped. A phone camera lifted, then another. Whispers rose. "Is that real?" "That's her voice." "He said that?" I scanned the room. Seraphine had gone pale, her posture stiff. Merrick looked stunned. Lathan stood frozen, mouth slightly open. Reporters began pulling out notepads. One near the front turned to a board member and asked, "When were these funds audited last?" Seraphine stepped forward, trying to cut the projector feed. "This is slander," she said, voice cracking. "This is manipulation. This isn't sanctioned." Someone shouted from the crowd, "Let it finish!" She paused. The final slide appeared, a scanned copy of the original foundation agreement, signed by Eliora, listing Brooklyn Loring as the successor administrator. Dated. Notarized. Twist, S17 landed. I stepped up to the edge of the stage, not to take the mic, not to plead, not to scream. I just stood there. When the silence reached its peak, I spoke. "You built this family on illusion," I said softly. "I just made it honest." No one clapped. No one needed to. I turned and walked out. Outside, the air was cooler than expected. I didn't rush to my car. I just stood beneath the awning, watching as the lights inside flickered through the windows. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Law office, meeting confirmed for 9 a.m. Estate dispute. I read it twice. Then I whispered to myself, round 2. Truth burns slowly, but it leaves nothing unscathed. 2 months after that night at the gala, I stood in a courtroom that smelled like old paper and regret, the kind of place where no one really wins. Some just leave with a piece of their dignity still intact. Merrick sat across the aisle from me, older somehow. His suit looked crisp, but he didn't. He kept fiddling with the knot of his tie, eyes darting toward the double doors as if waiting for someone else to walk in and fix this for him. Seraphine wasn't there. She was dealing with a different courtroom, civil, this time. Her name had appeared on 2 local news sites and 1 national blog. Southern Woman Behind Charity Scandal, they called it. The foundation board had issued a statement distancing themselves. Lathan had gone silent online. The crypto wallet was frozen. Investigations were pending, but today it was just Merrick and me. When the judge ruled in my favor, I didn't flinch, not because I didn't care, but because I was already tired of reacting. My mother's house was legally mine again. So were the remaining assets she'd left behind, the jewelry, the land, the community fund that had sat in limbo since her death. The court acknowledged the forged documents, the illegal transfers, and the conflict of interest in the reallocation. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. It felt like paperwork catching up with truth. That night, I packed what little I owned from that house and moved into a small rental cottage just outside of town. It had peeling paint and old pipes, but the windows faced east, and the light in the morning made the kitchen feel like a warm, honest place. On the first night there, I unpacked one thing before the rest. A photo of my mother, Eliora. She was laughing in it, holding a pie in both hands, flour on her cheek. I placed it on the mantel and whispered, "We're home." I didn't tell anyone where I moved, not Merrick, not Lathan, no one in the family, if you could still call them that. I changed my number. Let the silence grow between us, not out of spite, but preservation. Twist S20 came quietly. The relaunch of the Eliora Hope Foundation. I filed the paperwork myself, restructured the mission, and rewrote the charter. This time, it wasn't just for scholarships. It would provide transitional housing and legal support for women leaving abusive or manipulative households, the kind of women who didn't look like victims until it was too late. Women like me. I hosted the first fundraiser in a borrowed church hall, folding chairs and all. No string quartet, no gala dresses, just stories, survivors, a community relearning how to show up for one another. A reporter from the local paper came to cover it. She was younger than me, but sharp, asked smart questions. Toward the end of the interview, she asked, "Is this about getting back at them?" I smiled, small and steady. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's repair." The article came out the next Sunday. No clickbait, no sensationalism, just a story about a daughter who lost her mother, her place, and her voice, and found a way to build something from the ashes. 1 week later, I received a letter from Merrick. I didn't open it at first, just stared at the envelope for a while. Then one morning, with the windows open and the sun pouring in, I tore it open. It was handwritten, 5 sentences. "I know I hurt you. I didn't know what else to do when she started changing everything. I thought silence would protect something, maybe myself, maybe you. I was wrong." It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest I'd ever get. 2 days later, I visited him. He looked smaller in person than I remembered. Grayer. When I stepped into his front yard, he stood on the porch, confused. "You really came," he said. I nodded. We sat on opposite ends of the porch swing, the space between us filled with years. He asked, "You really had to do all that?" I turned to him. "You taught me how to shut up," I said quietly, "but you never taught me what to do when I stopped." We didn't talk much after that. I left before the porch light came on. That was enough. The final twist wasn't in a courtroom or a foundation or a scandal. It was peace. A month later, during another fundraiser for the foundation, a teen girl lingered after the event. She approached slowly, clutching the program like it held something sacred. "Why'd you name it after your mom?" she asked. I looked at her, saw the fear behind her eyes, the same kind I used to carry in my chest like a second heartbeat. "Because she saw me before I disappeared," I told her. She nodded once and walked away, her shoulders just a little straighter. I watched her go, then walked toward the exit, alone, but not lonely. Some scars don't fade, but they stop bleeding, and that's enough. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the very ones who teach you how to disappear. But silence isn't strength. Truth is, if you've ever felt like the black sheep in your own home, ask yourself, what would you do if your voice was the only thing left to defend your story? Let us know in the comments below. Your story might just help someone else feel seen. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that cut deep, heal slowly, and remind us we're never truly alone.